Welcome, Denise. Thank you for this interview. Thank you for taking your time to share your background and your research findings with our community of women sustainable extractives and leadership. So this is a great opportunity for us, to get to know more about your research, more about your personal experience. We did PhD together pretty much at the same time, and and I know, that you have a very interesting and passionate story about pretty much the mining industry. So you have a lot to give and a lot to share with other women, not only in Australia, but globally in Latin America, in Africa, and other locations in Asia Pacific. So thank you so much, Janice, for this interview. And please let us know more about you, your background.
Okay, I'm Australian, so I grew up in Sydney, in New South Wales. I currently live in central Queensland in a town called Mackay, which is a very big coal mining region. Um, I'm married, I have three children, and I have recently finished my PhD, which was about the impact of having children on the careers of women in the Australian mining industry. Um, so the mining industry has always been a part of my life. My father was a civil engineer who did a lot of work on building mining infrastructure and processing plants and things like that. When I first went to university at the end of 2000, at the beginning of 1975, I started a science degree and geology was one of my subjects, which I loved. I didn't finish that degree because I wasn't very good at maths and chemistry. But I met my husband in geology, and my husband is a geologist. So I went from my father being involved in mining to marrying a geologist, and we have lived in the mining industry ever since. That has meant that we've moved around a lot. We spent 6 years living in Papua New Guinea when John was an exploration geologist, and we returned to Australia, and we've moved up and down the east coast of Australia. So it's been a very interesting life. I certainly haven't stayed in one place all the time, but being part of the mining industry, or married to the mining industry, if you like to put it that way, certainly comes with a lot of challenges. Throughout my husband's career, we've moved home 9 times, and it's very difficult in Australia, at least, and I'm sure other countries are the same, that each state has their own educational system. So each time we move, they would have to learn new systems. My youngest son learned 3 different styles of handwriting in 14 months. So and then relocating was difficult for me. I was never able to sort of work consistently at anything. It also meant that we didn't live near extended family, which was difficult for our families and also our children, who probably didn't see enough of cousins and grandparents. Another challenge is that geologists and mining professionals spend a lot of time away from home. So that's always fun. The car always breaks down when they're away. And since then he's worked fly in, fly out, and in exploration. But that's just part of life in the mining industry. Another challenge has been the boom and bust nature of the industry. So when there's a strong demand for mining resources, there's lots of jobs around, and everyone's earning lots of money. But then when the prices drop, a lot of people become retrenched. We've been retrenched twice. Well, my husband's been retrenched twice. And, that can be very difficult. It can lead to financial insecurity and job insecurity. So, there's some of the challenges that happen with the mining industry. So my academic background is that I started university the first time in 1975, and I started a science degree, which I stopped for 2 years, as I explained. I re-entered university in 2004 after breaking my leg, and I started a Bachelor of Arts the University of Southern Queensland, and I majored in international relations, history, and anthropology. I went on to do my honours degree, which was on how Australia balances human rights in its foreign policy with China. And then I started my PhD at the University of Queensland, which is on the impact of having children on the careers of women in the Australian mining industry.
Okay, so you have an interesting background, and I love to bring to the research as well. I mean, you're pretty much like a sample of, a role model for other women who marry the industry or are working in the mining industry as well. So let's
Yes.
start, Denise, a little bit with your research question. I mean, you were interested basically in how families affect career decisions in the mining industry. So tell us more about that. Why drove you? We already know your background drove you to that.
Okay.
But what did you find? What were like the key findings of your study? And
Okay, so my PhD was advertised, and it was part of a broader study about women in the Australian mining industry. When I was lucky enough to get the PhD scholarship job, I was told, go and find a topic to research that is relevant to women in the Australian mining industry. So I decided to draw on my own experiences of moving around with children and moving them from schools, and I put myself into the place of, well, what would happen if I was a geologist as well? How would I manage with those situations? So that's how I came up with my research question, which is, and I can never remember it. Uh, how do families and relationships affect the career decisions, progression, and outcomes of technical professional women in the Australian mining industry? So this is really an important field of study for the mining industry, for its sustainability. It's acknowledged in business and academia that having a diverse workforce is good for business. It improves profitability. It contributes to employee satisfaction and the long-term sustainability of the industry. Women view problems from different perspectives from men, and they have different work styles. So they bring these factors together and they come up with different solutions to what they would come up with if you have a whole lot of men with similar backgrounds thinking about the same problem. So, and diversity doesn't only include women; it includes people from different ethnic backgrounds, and any type of diversity is good for a business. However, until the 1980s, it was illegal for women to work underground. And that meant that very few women actually worked in the mining industry. There are a few geologists, and that was about all because they could work on the surface. At that time, the Australian mining industry was basically focused on underground mining. In the 1980s, when anti-discrimination legislation came in, women started to enter the mining industry. In 1988, women only comprised about 10% of the mining industry. Since then, there's been a series of studies aimed at working out resolving the problem of the attraction and retention of women in the Australian mining industry, and they've come up with all sorts of solutions like mentoring and career pathways, and they've always identified work-family balance as an issue, but they've never investigated it thoroughly. At present, women comprise approximately 15% of the mining workforce, and a lot of them will be in traditional female roles like admin and cleaning and cooking and things like that, at mine sites. So they're not in technical professional roles. Women in STEM occupations, so that's science, technology, engineering and maths, which are non-traditional roles for women, probably only comprise between 3 and 5% of the mining workforce, maybe even less. I'm not quite sure of that figure. So as a result of all those studies, there are a few women who have started to achieve senior roles. And, some of them are very high profile. There's Megan Clark, who was the head of CSIRO and is on the Rio Tinto board these days. And there are a few other of those. But other studies have shown that over 40% of women cite family-related reasons for leaving. So that suggests to me that there's something about having children that is incompatible with the mining industry. So the first thing I did was to find out how bad people in the mining industry perceive their work-family balance. And we used statistical data, and we went in and the first thing we noticed was that women compared to men were much younger. They were less likely to have children and far less likely to be married than their male counterparts. So that suggests that, women leave because they have families or when they have families. We also found that women without children and who were not married reported the best work-family balance, whereas those with children reported the poorest. We also found that women who had flexible jobs so they could work part-time reported better work-family balance than those who were working full-time. So that suggested that there's a strong connection between having a family and leaving the mining industry. So the next thing that I looked at was, what's the problem here? So I decided to use a life course framework. Now, a life course framework says that everyone has an individual life course, and it is shaped by 5 factors. And this is the time they were born, so people born at the same time will go through similar periods of history. The place they were born, so you're born in Colombia, so you'll have very different cultural experiences to what I would have had or someone of my age would have had growing up in Australia. It's a result of their linked lives, so the social context within which they're embedded. And most people's linked lives involve partners, their children, extended families, and it could, various levels of friends and people like that. And also, life course is also shaped by the timing and sequence of your life events. So, did you follow the normal sequence, or did the women follow a normal sequence of events? So they finished their school, they started studying, they might have started work, they went into a relationship, and then they had children. Or did they have their children before they were married? Are they in relationships, or did they do these things out of the normal socially accepted order of doing things? And the last life course factor is human agency. How much control do people take of their own lives, and which direction do they use that agency? Do they say, I really want to be career oriented, or I really want to have a family, and so these are the factors that shape their women's life courses. So I used this framework to collect data from women, and I divided them into 4 different groups. One was women without children and who may or may not have been in relationships. I had a group of single mothers who, some of them had been married and divorced and separated, others had never been married, and I had women with children, and they fell into 2 groups. And the first group were women who were the primary wage earners, and they might have a partner who was a stay-at-home partner to look after the children. That meant that the woman was able to prioritise her career. She did not have to take time out of the workforce for career breaks or to work part-time to look after her children because her partner took all that responsibility. Some of these women they shared caregiving and wage earning, so they would manage that between them. And the second group of women were those women who prioritised their partners' careers and prioritised their caregiving and did not prioritise their own careers. So, their partner's career was more important than theirs, and their chief role was as caregiver.
So the conclusion is, do you think that your studies your research is consistent with government and corporate reports that actually say that like the mining industry, there is um, a
Sorry,
challenge.
you're breaking up.
So, my question is the following. So, according to what you have said, do you think your research is consistent with government and corporate reports that actually show that work-life balance um, has implications? I mean, there is a problem in terms of work-life balance of women working in the mining industry. Is this
Oh,
found?
definitely.
Okay.
I think the big problems with the mining industry are that, firstly, it has the lowest rate of part-time work. So only 4% of jobs in the mining industry are part-time. And that's compounded by long working hours. So, people will work 12-hour shifts. So not only are they working full-time, they're working 12-hour shifts. And factors like having to travel or be away or work, fly in, fly out. I mean, these are all factors that have been shown to be bad for your work-life balance. So my findings support that their work-family balance is definitely a problem in the mining industry.
And then you were talking about these three types of women. I would like you to focus on the time a little bit more on those three types of women. Women with children, women without children, and single mothers. So you were talking about women with children and the challenges they experience in the mining industry. Do you think that somehow the mining industry discriminates against women with children working in the mining industry?
I think it's the inflexibility of the mining industry in that you have to you have to start work at 7 o'clock in the morning, whether your childcare opens at 7 o'clock or not, makes it very difficult. And some women that I interviewed had a great deal of trouble with things like that. Like they couldn't stagger their working hours. Their boss wouldn't let them start at 7:30 instead of 7 o'clock. So it's inflexibility about these things that makes it hard for women who need flexibility to manage their children and still have a satisfying career.
What about women without children?
Women without children, some of them were very high achieving. So, they were able to go into their career. They didn't have to worry about anyone else's career. They didn't have to worry about caregiving. And some of them achieved very strong careers. But there were a couple that actually didn't achieve very much at all. They sort of, I think the standout group of women that I found from this were the women who became the primary caregivers when they had a partner. And some of them achieved as high, if not higher, than the women who didn't have children at all. So there was this big, two very separate groups of women with children. There were those who were able to manage their time. They didn't take long career breaks. They never worked part-time. And they had someone else to look after their children so they could forget about that side of their lives. And those women who were looking after their children, who prioritised their husband's career. And an interesting factor was that out of the 50 women that I interviewed, something like 38 of them, I think it was, were in or had been in long-term relationships with men who were in the mining industry. So this automatically brings into play what they call the two-body problem, which is finding two jobs for both professionals at the same operational site. And this is something that hasn't been identified before in the mining industry. It has been identified in science careers in the United States and in Europe, especially in academic careers, where you get two people who are qualified in very similar professions, but very specialised professions. And you might be able to get a job on the east coast of America or a job on the west coast, but every little university in between doesn't offer jobs in that. And these couples find that they can't get two jobs at the same location. So one person gets a job that might require them to move, and then the couple has to manage how how are we going to deal with this problem? And this is what happened in what I found in the mining industry is that, some people like me had moved up to 9 times for their husband's career, right? And every time, if you're both professionals, every time you move, you have to, every time one person gets the opportunity or is forced to move, you have to say, well, how are we going to manage that? Because it's not a matter of going from one suburb to the other. It's a matter of relocating maybe hundreds of kilometres. And so people put into place, there were four broad strategies, but the most common was that one person would become a trailing spouse. And usually that was the woman because she was the one who was going to take time out of the workforce to have children. She was going to likely to work part-time, and this is something they negotiate together. And every time their partner is relocated, there is less chance of them getting another job at their level of expertise. Yeah. So this is a major factor in why women leave or why their careers don't progress.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes they have to choose, right? They have to choose between their careers and their, their life, their relationships as well. Because there is no compatibility. Right. Yeah.
That's right. You can't, if you're in, say, Mount Isa, which is, say a copper mine, and you're both working there, you marry, even before you have children, you might have to make that decision because if you're in a relationship with someone else who is off, or you might be offered a job somewhere else, as a couple, you have to work out how you're going to manage that. And for the women who became the secondary wage earners, it was a major problem, like something like 19 out of 23, I think it was, had become trailing spouses. And they had, relocated many, many times, I can't remember the figures offhand, but it was like, 9 times and 8 times, 6 times and 7 times. And every time they moved, they were, they might get a job, but it would be at a lower level because companies don't say, well, your partner's a geologist as well. Does she want a job? Often they'll say, well, maybe we can give her a bit of part-time work, or she can work as a field assistant, or she can do some office work. But, companies don't come up and say, okay, well, you're both geologists. We'll move both of you.
So, Denise, did you have the opportunity to work with single mothers, and what does your research say? Single mothers. I'm talking about single mothers. So, did you have the opportunity to work with single mothers, and what does your research say about single mothers? What do you find?
Yeah, I had 7 single mothers in the group of women that I interviewed, and they're all very different circumstances, so there's no pattern because, it depended on how much experience they had when they became single mothers, or, what sort of relationship they had ongoing with their ex-partner. So some of them had shared relationship, shared custody of their children and financial support from their ex-partners, where others had absolutely nothing. And so it really depended on their careers, in a way, depended on what those relationships were like. But all of them, in the end, they were all working full-time, and they were all doing quite well when I spoke to them. But, you couldn't generalise about single mothers, I don't think, because there are just too many different factors about how old the children were and what sort of support they have. But it was very interesting because there haven't been many studies done on professional single mothers academically. So it was very interesting trying to find any other previous work on how most studies that look at single mothers look at women from low socio-economic backgrounds and low education, because that's generally the how they're characterised. But these ones were well educated. They all had university degrees. They all wanted to work, and so that was very interesting. Yeah.
So in your research, you mentioned some of the limitations that these women face. Some are childcare, flexible work. Can you please expand more on that and what other limitations these women face in the industry when working in the mining industry?
Sorry, can you say that again? The last bit.
So could you please expand more on the limitations that you find on your research, limitations that the women in the mining industry face when working for, for the mining sector?
The career barriers.
Yeah, the career barriers. So you mentioned some like childcare, flexible work. So could you please tell us more about that?
Okay, so I chose the three main barriers that I found that were the most commonly discussed were trying to stick to the mining industry career path. The mining industry expects people to work full time. They expect them to be able to relocate, as in we were just talking about the two body problem. So they need to be able to get up and move from Mount Isa to Cobar or something like that, or overseas even. To achieve career progression, you need to accumulate experience in remote and regional operational experience, which in Australia is in remote and regional locations, which means that people either have to live in the mining towns close to the site, or they have to work on a fly-in, fly-out basis. So fly-in, fly-out is fine for women who don't have children and don't have partners, and most the ones that did it before they had children enjoyed it. But once they have children, no one wants to go away for 10 days at a time. No, women don't want to do that. The alternative to fly-in, fly-out is living in a mining town. And mining towns are great for young families because they'll provide schools and childcare, and they'll have playgroups and activities in schools and things like that. But once children get older, the participants I spoke to said, well, the education isn't as good as if we lived in town, and a lot of people leave at that time when their children become older. If the male is the main breadwinner, he will often go and do fly-in, fly-out at that point. But for women, they'll be stuck in a town or city, and they haven't got enough career experience to get a senior role, and they end up in low-level jobs doing office work, or they leave the industry. Childcare, it's a problem for women all over the place, but in Australia, 1 in 2 children are looked after by their grandparents at least some of the time. Because people move around in mining, most people don't live near their parents, so those people are not available for childcare. So they have to pay for childcare. Centres, even in mining towns, often don't open and close. Their hours are not congruent with working hours. So people end up relying on nannies and friends and neighbours for childcare, and that can be unreliable, and people aren't sure if it's really the best thing for their children. So childcare is a problem. Flexible work, as I mentioned, only 4% of jobs in mining are part-time. So that automatically cuts out an awful lot of women. Women either work full-time or they don't work. 4% of jobs is not very many. Women also stagger their hours. They work from home, and some of them become consultants and contractors so that they can work their own hours around the work that they get. But, they have less job security doing that. The problem with part-time work also, as well as not being very much of it, is once they go into these roles, it can be very difficult to get out. There are no career opportunities, so that they're given menial work without often miss out on training sessions, and they don't get the promotion opportunities as well. So they are 3 of the main career barriers. There are probably others.
Yeah. So. I'm very sure that actually those career barriers are the same that women face, for example, in other locations like Latin America or other parts of Asia Pacific and Africa, right? And in terms of policy implications, what do you think are the policy implications of your study? What are the recommendations, yeah, at the policy level, both for governments and corporations?
Okay, I think there are so many things that they need to look at as far as um, the two-body problem. We'll do this the way I talked about them. The two-body problem in America, Scientific American does a survey every few years about the two-body problem amongst scientists in America. I think the mining industry in Australia needs to do one of those. I think they need to survey couples who are in the mining industry or where people have left the mining industry because of it to find out how severe it is, because I only have data from 50 people as far as that's concerned. They need to have a look at mining industry career paths and see if there are other ways that people can get experience, or you can, recognise that women have children that they want to withdraw from the workforce for certain amounts of time, but that doesn't mean they don't want a career. They need to improve the ramps back in so that they can come in part-time and they can still get managerial experience, because most part-time jobs are only in technical roles. So they need to ensure that women can come back in and get the experience necessary to restart their careers after they have children. As far as childcare is concerned, I think the industry needs to talk to government about childcare opening hours, especially in mining towns. It makes no sense that childcare centres in mining towns especially don't cater for the people who live there. They need to make sure there are enough places, and if they can't do that, maybe the government and the mining industry can look at a system of finding informal carers, so like nannies and au pairs, but making sure they're vetted so that when people arrive in a mining town, there's someone they know who is reliable that they can trust to look after their children, instead of getting there and finding out that there's no one to look after their children. As far as flexible work goes, all other industries have more part-time jobs than mining. So, I mean, it's very hard to say, well, if you're working fly in, fly out, you have a part-time job. That doesn't make any sense. But there are a lot of jobs where there could be job sharing, where there could be part-time work that assist people to keep their careers going and stay in the mining workforce.